Go ahead and call the January 11th meeting of the board to order and ask you to rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks to the board for agreeing to reschedule the meeting from last week. I had to be out of town for some business travel, so I appreciate your flexibility with that. And I'd also like to extend a thank you to Steve Bailey, who just did from the Maine School Management Association, who just did an hour-long professional development workshop with the board on roles and responsibilities. Thank you to him for that as well. I'm not aware of any, I'm going out of order. Next on the agenda is approve the minutes for the December 6th meeting. I have a motion.
I move we accept the minutes as written.
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor? That is unanimous. Now I am not aware of any adjustments to the agenda. Brings us to item 6, public comment. Anyone from the public wish to address the board? Brings us to item 7. We have a legislative update from Representative McCray. I'll share some information on some research she's been doing for a possible generator. And maybe we could dive into some other questions. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm Jay McCray, and I serve as a representative for West Bath, Harpswell, and a little bit of Brunswick. And during the storm, which you all remember, that we were out for how many days, I had calls from many people, including an email from Bob's wife. And after that, we started a conversation about could the school be a shelter, and to be a shelter, a generator was needed. So I said I would do some research, and I've done that. Certainly I didn't approach this as any commitment or making any decisions for anybody, but just to find out information. So I started, Bob had shared with me the issue of the school being a great place for a shelter because of the kitchen and the space, and the other issue was the loss of food during the storm. And I'm not sure what else. I don't know if there was any damage to the school.
Thankfully, there wasn't this time around, but certainly if it had been last week, it would have been catastrophic.
Absolutely. We were so lucky it wasn't cold during that storm, but we may not be next time. As an aftermath of the storm, I met with CMP to talk about response time and the problems with the website and everything else that was going on. One of the things they told me, which you probably know, is that if a place is designated as a shelter, they prioritize and you get power back sooner, which would be an advantage if it's a shelter, of course. I talked with, I checked in with Chief Beam, fire chief, just to make sure. I knew that the generator at the fire barn had broken. I knew that was a shelter, and he just filled me in that they've ordered a generator there. They're hoping to be Red Cross certified. It's going to take a while to get the generator, but he was absolutely in support of this, which probably you've already talked to him about, but in case you hadn't. I reached out to him because one of the things an avenue I was checking was the Department of Public Safety. Would they help? And I was advised to have the fire chief call. Well, I was told when I talked with that department, they don't help with generators. I had also talked with Saginaw County Emergency Management System, Sarah Bennett. I know she's been involved with all of this, and she, in my first conversation, said she has limited Homeland Security funding. It's very small. It wouldn't cover a generator, and it's gone anyway. Is this all information you already have? So I don't want to.
I think bits and pieces of it, some of us know, but I don't think the whole group knows.
I
So keep
forwarded to a few people some of our conversations.
Okay.
And that's primarily the source.
Okay, so stop me if I'm telling you what you already know or don't want to know. When I talked with her the first time, she was actually in the field meeting with FEMA to see, they were looking at whether the state would be a disaster zone. She offered to research, and I talked with her this week, and she has done that. She's talked with the Maine Emergency Management System. Saginaw is a smaller county, for example, than Cumberland, where they have more resources, but she went to the state to ask for help, and the state has been designated as a disaster from the storm, which opens up the possibility of funds, though not quickly. So she's very careful to say, we may qualify, but I spoke with Adam Garland today, who also said, 25 years later. But so that's not an immediate fix, but it's a possibility. She also said that there's some other possible funding, depending on what your plan is for the school, whether it's a community shelter or if the school would be closed while the shelter's in, or if it's to be able to operate the school. That drives different funding sources. So I'm going to be meeting with her. Adam will be involved. I don't know if someone from the board, superintendent, wants to be involved to talk about what they might be able to offer. She's been very excited about trying to help with this, which was very gratifying. As the fire barn would like to be Red Cross certified, she was saying that if the school does become a shelter, the ideal is to be Red Cross certified, because then they come in and they pay for everything, which is an advantage to the town. So no decisions, no offers, but interest. Saginaw Emergency Management does want to help. I think they're being creative, so it's a good possibility. I think Adam was going to try and set up a meeting. I don't know if he contacted you, but anyway, soon they'll be to be able to sit down with her and see what our options are to try to get some funding for a generator that would be helpful to obviously setting up a shelter, but also not costing the town resources the town would rather spend elsewhere or doesn't have. I think that summarizes.
Okay, thank you.
No decision, but hope.
You had mentioned one of the questions being, will the school stay open, will the school close, and the different funding depending on that answer?
Mhm.
What's the right answer?
You know,
In terms of revenue.
I had the same question, and I don't know. I tried to get there, and I'm not sure that she knows the answer to that. She's researching and learning, so that would be an important thing to know going in now.
For your update on our end, this issue's been sent to our facilities committee to kind of assess the building, the needs.
Mhm.
Maybe it started identifying some of the costs. So certainly stay in touch as we both work on our projects on our end.
That would be great. And one thing that I didn't mention was the ask was about getting a generator. When Bob first contacted me, you probably know this too, but there are generators. You might be able to borrow a generator, maybe, but in a crisis, that's not the best option. And even if there is one available, you may not have the right fitting. So she was saying that generator is obviously the first choice. A second option, possibility, is to fit the school for a borrowed generator. But how do you know which generator is going to fit which fitting? So
Yeah, that's part of what we're hoping the facilities committee can at least narrow down and see what options are there.
Just a side note, Keith, some of the discussion with the selectmen, I think by the governor declaring this emergency, that there may be some funding for the generator for the fire department now.
Right.
And whereas the town's already approved that money, worst case scenario, I don't see why that can't be shifted over here. If you're gonna pay for it itself.
Because that broke during the storm.
Right.
The generator did.
During its use during the storm.
Yes.
But the money been approved is $17,000, but it was $18,000. If that money has already been approved with the town, from the building fund, town building fund, worst case, if you can't get funding for it, grant money, whatever else, shift that money back to here. And
It
if
sounds
you
like the first thing we've got to figure out is what do we need and what's it gonna cost?
you've got to have it sized up, yes.
And that's kind of what we charge the facilities committee to pick them up with.
That's the first place, yeah.
Questions from the board? I know it's not what you, I'm sorry,
No, I just wanted to say thank you for doing all of that
absolutely.
legwork and the meetings and the context. It's much
Oh,
appreciated.
thank you. It's, you know, the title is representative, so I gotta do that.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that a lot of our action has to, and that has to be drawn out essentially by these conversations, is assume that Saginaw County would have to have some sort of request for a proposal, something on that order, and then we'd have to read the specifics there and then tailor a proposal not only for the facilities that we need, but also to meet the grant, and that relates to is the school going to remain open, or halftime, or what? And also with Red Cross certification, prohibit the school from being open at the same time. I mean, I don't know what those
All
issues
things we
are.
gotta figure out, yeah.
And I don't know those answers. Those are great questions. Sarah Bennett did say that exactly what you said, there would have to be request and application and paperwork.
Always,
But we know paper.
yeah, absolutely. I know that was why you came this evening, but we have you here.
Sure.
And you've been in committee hearings all day, certainly so appreciate you giving up your time this evening to come here. Anything in Augusta coming down the pipeline that we should know about? Any changes with funding possibilities? Talked a bit about some of the pre-K changes that are coming through. Any updates there that you can offer us? And I apologize for putting you on the spot with that.
No, that's fine. I don't know, our first day was last Wednesday, and then we got snowed out. And so today and this week was day 2 and 3, because when it's Tuesday, Thursday session, it'll get more. But,
Sure.
I do know that there is this discussion of having public school be the place where early childhood occurs instead of child development services. I don't know where that's going to go. I met with the Brunswick School Board, and much to my surprise, they were very positive about it. I had reservations because of size, staff, training, all of that. So I don't know how this school board feels about it, which would actually be helpful as the bills come forward to know if that's something you're wanting or not wanting.
We haven't taken a formal vote on it, but my sense is we're very concerned about the financial impact, especially being a minimum receiver. It could be, maybe devastating is too strong of a word, but it would hurt.
Well,
So we're watching it very closely.
that makes sense. I mean, Brunswick is a big system compared to West Bath. Another issue that we have had conversations about is funding for special education students. And Adam and I and Eloise Vitelli, who's the senator, met with Department of Ed people last year. And there was a proposal in the budget to offer hardship funding. I don't know where that is. But that was something that was suggested by the governor and could be applied for. But I know that's been a big issue for West Bath.
I know that, we've had some discussions, and other visitors have had discussions, that whether that should be a state responsibility, because what really is a killer is that when you have a special needs or two special needs students move into a very small community, that's a huge hit, which is what happened here basically. Whereas some other school district didn't have to pay that money. So I mean, it's the same money, but it's just being transferred to a much smaller pot, or the obligation to a much smaller pot, and it would make much more sense if somehow there was state administration of the funds. Now, however that happens, the state wouldn't necessarily have to pay for it, but if there could be a pot established basically where the different school districts pay into it, and then it's paid out to the students or for the students based upon where they happen to be in a given year.
Yeah,
That would
different
make more
states
sense.
do it differently. And I've worked in schools forever. In fact, Steve Bailey was one of my principals when I worked in the elementary level. One of my favorite principals. And I watched as it became more and more difficult to provide services. The needs of the kids are much more severe. I worked in the middle school for 15 years at the end of my time in the public school. And the first year I was there, the big concern was one of the sixth graders, the rumor was he was smoking cigarettes. And I don't take the blame for all this, but by the time I was done at 15 years later, that was the least of our worries. Not to minimize the problems of tobacco, but we had, selling their Ritalin and, overdosing. Terrible. One of the things that when we met with the Department of Ed, one of the things that was talked about, and I think you're aware of, is regionalization. The suggestion that communities not regionalize the whole district, but regionalize special ed programs. So there was Wiscasset had been granted a grant. So there was Adam and the Department of Ed people were, that was a discussion. Would it make sense to tie in with that? I think you're already sending some kids to Brunswick, no?
We send students to Brunswick who, through school choice, our students attend RSU1 schools as a school of guarantee, and so they have access to all those programs as needed already through our withdrawal agreement.
Okay.
So regionalization doesn't help us in that
Doesn't
situation because we already are part of that consortium through our withdrawal agreement.
Okay. Well, that was their best suggestion at the time, and then the discussion that there might be this other funding available for hardship, like for minimum receivers with a sudden cost, just as West Bath is. Other big issues that will certainly impact kids is the passage of the Medicaid expansion. I don't know it's law. It needs to be implemented. We'll see. There's a lot of resistance from some members of government. There is legislation to address child hunger, child health care, substance use disorders, neonatal abstinence syndrome, those kinds of things which can affect every community. So those are the highlights that come to my mind.
Thank you. Further questions from the board? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Sure.
Appreciate your support. Brings us to item 8, committee reports. 8.1 policy committee. No update?
Only that we obviously got several policies that recommended that we need to focus on.
Take a look at those.
And also, based on an update letter from MSMA, I'm looking over policy JL, student wellness. There are some actions that needed to be added to that. I'm looking to revise that particular one.
8.2, technology committee. 8.3, facilities committee. 8.4, finance committee. 8.4.1, payroll warrants were reviewed and signed on 12/12, 12/22, and again on 1/6. 8.4.2 AP warrants. Dennis reviewed and signed AP warrants on 12/6, 12/21, and 1/5. And then I reviewed those and signed those on 12/6, 12/22, and 1. Item 9, superintendent's report.
Okay, first with the financial report, you have the budget document with expenditures through December. And with 50% of the year, we have 63.88% of our budget remaining. However, I want to point out a couple of things. On the first page, tuition elementary public, it was noted that our October payment to RSU1 was missed. And so it's been paid, but it's not in this budget document. And so that payment for elementary school was $33,563.16. So there's actually 68.3% of that budget line remaining. I just want you to be aware of. On the second page, under tuition secondary public, the same piece of with the October billing, that tuition amount was $37,749.42. And so there's 75% of that budget line remaining. And then the only other item that you should note in looking at the overall budget document is on the very final page with the food service transfer. You'll see that the budget has $35,000 in it. That money all has been sent to the food service fund, and so that actually should not have money remaining in the budget, and we'll fix that for the next line. So if you check out the two tuition items that I just pointed out and that $35,000, it's a reduction of $106,312.58, which means that there's 60.1% of our budget remaining at this time of the year, which is still where we need to be. Our lines are all tracking well. I have no areas of concern at this time in terms of the line items.
Has the prolonged cold snap impacted our fuel spend substantially?
It has not appeared to in the grand scheme of things. I'm hopeful that as the weather has warmed up, that we're going to trend okay. We will keep watching that. Still within the finance update, I want to talk about tuition rates. And as you know, we have to set a budget for our tuition for grades 6 through 12, but we don't get our tuition rate set by the state until December. And so we have to make a guess of what the tuition is going to be. It's usually tuition rises between 3 and 5% each year. This year we budgeted for 4% of our current number of students plus 3 extra students. That's how we budgeted it. And so tuition was set in December. And in the 6 through 8 level, we came out ahead. At 9 through 12, the tuition was more than 4%. However, there were fewer students because we had some students who had left the district. And so you can see in the chart that I created for you what our tuition rate for 6th through 8th grade and 9 through 12 was last year at 16-17 rate. What we budgeted for with a 4% increase in the number of students. And then what the actual amount ends up being for 6th through 8 and 9 through 12. The next column is the budgeted amount what's in our budget for tuition. The anticipated cost is now with the new tuition rates and the actual number of students we have, what we should anticipate. And so we're looking at some potential savings from what we have in our tuition, which helps to support our carryover funds of $118,023.71. Now, again, if we had had the number of students we had projected to have at 9 through 12, we would have been had some trouble with tuition because we did not budget for greater than 4% amount. But when we talk about our budget for next year, we'll have to think about, again, how do we project our costs. The other side of that is that the West Bath tuition also has increased. And so we had budgeted revenue for tuition credit of $113,993.40. But now with the having tuition set, we can see that our anticipated revenue is $135,937.20, which gives us additional revenue of $21,943.80. So that is good news at this time of year as we're beginning to think about what our carryover will look like moving into next year, because last year our tuition funds are where most of our carryover did come from. Are there any questions about tuition?
Am I reading this right, that you estimated tuition and you were only off by $40 for K through 8?
Yes.
That's impressive.
But that's just luck. honestly, because we
No,
said 3 to 5% and chose 4.
Really
It's just the way it worked out. And we're fortunate that while in 9 through 12 tuition went up, we had fewer students. So it worked out okay, but it wouldn't have otherwise.
This may be a broad general question, but do we know why the tuition rate increase differs between different age groups?
Tuition is an exact calculation of per pupil cost of the prior
Okay.
year. So that's where the money comes from.
Thank you.
It's just more expensive to run a high school than it is to run an elementary school. Okay, in terms of district updates, I just have a few. I wanted to just update you on our celebration of learning, which was December 21st at, had 3 to 4 was our celebration time. Last year we had it during the school day and it was very well attended. We weren't sure right before vacation how it was going to go to ask parents to come for an hour at the end of the day right before then taking time off from work. But we had 100% participation from families, which is just extraordinary. That's never happened before, where every child had a family member, at least one, who was here to hear what they had to say. Certainly something that does not happen in any community that I know of. So I'd like to thank all of our parents for taking the time out of their day to attend the celebration, and of course thank our teachers and students for preparing and sharing all their hard work. So our next celebration of learning will be in June.
I recommend you extend the time.
Beyond an hour.
So some parents can have more time to.
You know, if you are a parent who has 4 children within our school, we'll open doors to you during the student practice times. We're happy to do that. It's hard. An hour is not enough time if you plan to visit multiple classrooms. We try to encourage people to attend at least 2. But it's also, an hour is about the amount of time that our younger children can hang in there. So there's a balance. But we can certainly work with families to make sure they get to all the places they need to go. The next on our district update was special education audit, which actually did not happen. We were supposed to be audited on Wednesday. Our special ed director, Sarah Hellman, has worked diligently and arduously to prepare and had all of our student files from K through 12 ready, but the woman who was doing our audit from the Department of Education was sick. And so that will be rescheduled for some point during the spring, and I will update you there. I do want to let you know that the school choice window has opened for applications. Our school choice window runs from the beginning of January till February 14th. And so the policy was updated based on our last board meeting, and that was posted to our website. All of the tuition figures were updated in the communications that went to home, as well as all the communications that went out had the changes that reflected the policy changes, so all that wording was clear. Our 5th grade students got the information sent home about their choices for 6th grade and beyond, and all of our current families who access school choice received information in the mail, and it's posted on our website and on our Facebook page. So hopefully it's been disseminated to all the places that it needs to go, and we'll accept applications through February 14th.
And what's the number before the lottery kicks in?
75%, 25% of our students can access school choice before the lottery kicks in. Is that what's the way you're asking?
Sure, I can give them that.
And then the final update is just to let you know that this was an update last month also, but it was snowed out. We will have our 4th and 5th grade winter concert on January 18th at 5:30, which is next Thursday night. And it may be something that actually we plan for in the future, that we do our K to 3 before winter break and our older kids after winter break. It's sort of nice to come back to having an opportunity to celebrate and get together for the sake of music in January as well. So you are all welcome to attend that winter concert next Thursday.
Any questions? Good update, thank you very much. Brings us to item 10.1, school calendar storm days.
So the item before us today is to do the final update to readjusting our calendar based on our October storm days. And we did not have our January professional development day. Instead, that was a student day, with the understanding that we would move our professional development day to a Saturday. The staff felt that they would prefer to spend a day here on a Saturday rather than asking families and students to come on a Saturday. So the staff has elected to have our professional development day on Saturday, January 27th. We would run a half-day program from 8:15 to 11:45, which would still count as a full school day, but allows us to be here and focused on the work in front of us for that period of time. So what we need in order for that to happen and to be approved is for the board to approve that as a calendar change. Professional development day for Saturday, January 27th.
So we accept January 27th as Professional Development Day.
I will second it with great appreciation to our staff giving up Saturday so we can get out of school before the middle of August. Any questions? Discussion?
Anything more about Late Start Wednesdays?
There is nothing more about late start Wednesdays. RSU1 has decided that they are going to wait until April to determine what the need is for making days up in regards to using late starts, and then are going to work backwards from June. And as you know from our conversations, that because of transportation, we don't have access to our buses to have a full day of school if RSU1 is having late starts. And I did check in about the regulations around transportation, and we have to offer transportation, so not running our buses is not a choice. I feel like we've made up 2 full days given this change on the 27th. We've had 2 snow days. We're back to 5 days. Our current last day of school is set for June 19th. In March, we will be able to send a petition to the state to see if we can waive those storm days. And even if we have a couple of more, I can't imagine that we'd be looking at anything past June 21st or June 22nd. We would certainly look for other options like the Saturday beach cleanup days that we talked about, and would also revisit the conversation with RSU1 about possible Wednesdays if need be. We also do have a March staff development day that we could look at doing in a different way like we did in January. But right now, without having access to transportation, looking at late starts isn't an option for us.
So we have a motion and a second to make January 27th a professional development day. Any further discussion on that? All in favor? Please unanimous. Thank you. 10.2, Child Development Services. Update.
As I said, initially my I feel like it's really important to continue to bring child development services back to the table for the board to hear updates on. Last month, they had let you know that their final meeting was going to be on December 11th, and they were tasked to prepare recommendations for upcoming legislation. They had given you a list of all the questions that they still had. Just today, we received this document from the Department of Education that you have in front of you, and these are the recommendations for consideration from the committee that's to go to the legislation to begin to draft upcoming legislation. So if you move right down to funding, I think there are a few important points that the committee has asked the legislators who will be drafting the legislation to be thinking about. And that is that knowing that currently we're not able to fund special education services at CDS level, that you can't really expect that then the school districts are going to be able to cover those costs, and that the state needs to be thinking about if they're going to be moving CDS services to towns, that they need to still cover all those costs. They ask that it's not part of the current EPS formula, that it's looked at, funding is looked at in a way that's different than the way K through 12 funding is looked at currently. Again, point for you is that SAUs should be reimbursed for 100% of the costs of taking over CDS services. That we look at regionalization for the pre-K students, that there's startup funds. One of the things that they did identify that seems like districts could take on now is just the IEP case management for students. So not necessarily the delivery of services or having the students on site, but that you manage the IEPs. That there's some support with districts about how to be able to access main care funds. It's a really complicated process that not all districts know how to manage, including us. That's not something that we know how to do at this time. And that there are pilot funds for being able to begin to think about implementation of moving your young children to your school districts. there are some comments around facilities and staffing. Some of those pieces that are most important are thinking about that perhaps your CDS services aren't on your school site, but that you look at off-site programs like we have right now, so that could be considered as being able to be a way to provide services. Also talk about certification bridges. Right now, a couple of our staff members do have pre-K certifications, but most of our certifications are either K through 8, or we have some that are K through 3. And so looking at ways to be able to provide bridges for our current certifications to what we would need for having Birth to 5 certification. And then again, really thinking about regionalization. When you have a small community such as this, and maybe only 2 to 5 students who would need services, it might make sense to have more regionalized programs for CDS services. So those are the types of things that they asked the legislators to be considering. I did talk with Roy Fowler today, who's the state director for CDS, because one of the things that's not included in here are timelines for making this transition, and his response was that will be part of the written legislation, and that their task wasn't to come up with timeframes, and that he wishes that was something that was known, but that's not information that we have at this time because it depends on what's written in the legislation. That is the update. It's hot off the press as of today.
Any questions from the board on any of that stuff? Certainly something I want to continue to keep an eye on.
I actually do have a question. So where we don't have an in-house pre-K, and this might be something that's too specific to answer now, but is it the requirement of the organizations that we contract with to provide pre-K? Like, how are they tied into this? I'm wondering if they have an obligation to accept and provide services, or I'm thinking some of them are more privately operated.
They do not necessarily have an obligation currently.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything could change depending
Right.
on how the legislation is written.
Right.
But our students who do require CDS services, who do attend our pre-K, get their services where they are, in most cases.
Okay.
But we also don't have universal pre-K.
Right.
So I think those are questions that will come out of whatever is written in the next round of legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Item 10.3, SMLC update.
So like CDS, I just want to keep bringing this sort of back to the forefront of what's happening in regards to regionalization. And I think you did all receive the MSMA update about SMLCs in your email last week. But in short, the information that you should know is that 19 regional service centers were approved, and they range in different areas around the state. One of the ones that was approved was the one that we were approached to consider being a part of with Brunswick and MSA 75, and their focus was on professional development and summer programming for high school students. And as you know, given the time frame, it didn't seem that it made sense on the day that applications were due for us to sign on, especially because the content wasn't going to directly support the work that we needed to do. Another regionalization center that was approved is based out of Somerville, but includes RSU1 and Damariscotta, and Wiscasset. And that one is looking at bulk purchasing and also sharing of technology resources. And so whether or not that would have applied had we been invited, I don't know. But looking at Somerville as a center, that's quite a distance for us to be thinking about how to partner with. Other information that was shared in the update we got from MSMA is that districts who had Part 1 applications approved were eligible to have $46 per student allocated. And as minimum receivers, they said that perhaps up to 30% of those funds would still be able to come to districts who had decided to apply for Part A funds. So for us, that's $1,794 that we might have been eligible for, that would support administration that we won't have access to because we chose not to apply. On the other hand, I look at $1,794 and I think about the time that we have not spent yet, and also will not be spending to be able to draft interlocal agreements that are not necessarily in line with work that we're trying to do. It seems like it might not have been the best use of our time and our resources. I don't have regrets about that at all. The other thing you ought to know is that the state has decided that the other major financial incentive for joining SMLCs will not happen. And so that was that $138 per student would be coming to districts who did apply for Part 1 funds, and that is not going to happen. So there are a couple of pieces that really sort of reinforce the comments or the feeling the board had was let's sit back and not rush into things and see what makes sense for West Bath. And certainly continue to talk with districts, work with districts, and see what makes sense for partnerships for West Bath moving forward, and we'll continue to talk about those as they come up. Just wanted to give you the most recent update on that.
Thank you. Great segue to 11.1, communication from the Brunswick School Department.
Alright, in your packet I provided a letter that I received from the Brunswick superintendent, which came out of the board meeting that was in the newspaper that we discussed last time. And that is that he has invited neighboring school districts to come together to talk about collaborative projects that include district reorganization. They could be small in scope, like the things that are the summer school projects that I just talked about, but that the school board's also open to talking about forming RSUs, forming AOSs, finding ways to be able to collaborate to be able to support our collective taxpayers. My feeling is that we're always looking for ways to partner and to do our work better and more effectively and more efficiently. And if the board is in support of this, I'd like to have these conversations. Certainly it wouldn't be committing our town or our school or our school board into they wouldn't be making any decisions, but it would be opening those lines of communication a little bit more if that's something that you're open to.
We do have to make fairly clear that we are still contractually prevented from some types of collaborations because of the withdrawal agreement with RSU 1. Does that put what was it, 10-year, I think, moratorium on forming with another RSU?
The legislation itself does.
And so, right, so we're at least 7 years from even being able to legally do some of the things that they suggest in their letter.
I will go ahead and make a motion that we authorize the superintendent to engage in conversation and exploration. Certainly, I'll leave it at that.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? It is unanimous. And just for the board's information, I also received a copy of this letter. Identical copy.
Ending with the sentence, we certainly live in interesting times.
Ending with that sentence. Item 11.2, special education posting.
So this is a non-action item that I bring to you because it's atypical. And that is that we have a student who will be transitioning from an out-of-district placement to moving into Morse High School. And the student requires the support of an educational technician. Initially, when we were aware that we were going to be able to make this change for the student, Morse was planning on posting the position and hiring the staff to be able to support the student. And then the student was going to be able to start in this new year. However, on Saturday I received an email that RSU1 would like us to post and hire the staff for this position, which is the posting that you see in front of you to be able to support the education of the child. It's atypical because it feels very strange to be hiring a staff member for somebody else's school. And so we're still working on what is the right thing to do, both morally and legally, and making sure that everyone's sort of covered by liability type situations. But I feel like at this point my first responsibility is to the student. And so I posted the position to make sure that we have somebody so that the child can start school. And we will have to work out whether this sets a precedent or what the future practice will be for students at our schools of guarantee moving forward. I wanted you just to be aware because it's not something we've seen before in terms of the request. RSU one has asked this of other communities as well, and so it's not different for West Bath. It's just different practice than we've had in the past.
Any board questions? Comments?
Just they're asking us to post who's funding.
Well, we were required to fund regardless of if they had hired or if we had hired. The responsibility for paying for the services.
Yes, well, I mean, for this, a slightly different way. Is this a budgeted expense anticipated, or is this a surprise?
The position is not budgeted, but the student is budgeted for, and so the costs fall in line with what we had anticipated spending.
That answers.
And the
That answers what I was
position-
trying to get at.
And the position will end at the end of the school year.
Just a comment is when I was working at Morse as an ed tech and there was Union 47 as a separate entity, there were ed techs that were hired by Union 47, and so it's not something that's completely different than they've done in the past.
I think I appreciate hearing that because it feels very different to me, but it's something we just haven't come across before, and I think we're wrangling with what is the best way to do it in support of the student, in support of the schools.
We were ed techs working in the same classroom, even sort of with some of the children, and we had very different contracts and everything was from two different districts.
I appreciate hearing that. This is a new scenario for me. So, but we want to make sure that the child's able to attend school. So
And at this
let us
point, we're posting, going through the process, but continuing to ask
Continue to ask
those same questions and sorting out the details. It may turn out we don't need to do this, but it gets the process rolling.
I have a question. Is this specific to like a special education position, or like if there was a additional English teacher needed, would we be responsible for bearing some of that cost, or is it specific to like a one-on-one type scenario?
It's specific to the one-on-one
Okay.
type scenario. Although I think one of the things we need to work out is it specific to special education more broadly than a one-on-one?
Okay.
But at this time, it's specific to this case.
Is this student, it's a current student of ours?
Yes.
Is the child being educated right now, or is it in between, in limbo here?
It is a change of program. I think that that's really all that I can say.
Moving on to item 12, public comment. Public comment.
Just a quick question, item 13 is executive session for contract. Are you entering one tonight?
Repeat the second half of the question.
Okay, you're entering a executive session tonight for public contract negotiations.
We do have an executive session on the agenda, yes. We will be going into executive session.
Is that contract negotiations for whom?
We have multiple contracts with our staff that expire and need to be negotiated this year.
Not the teachers, I assume.
That is not correct. Teacher contract expires the end of this fiscal year. We've been doing this for 3 years already.
Yeah, I know, I thought we had some headway made last summer and fall on these contracts, teachers' contracts.
We have not begun the formal negotiating process yet.
Okay.
We're about to.
All right,
Any other public comment?
Could I just ask, I want to thank you again for letting me be here and ask that you let me know what you need from me and let me know this legislation that's mentioned. I'd love to know what you're looking for. Sometimes the legislation is dense. And it's very helpful if I know the will of the community. And if I can, just pass that card so you have a phone number in here.
Any other public comment? Item 13.1, I'm going to make a motion that we enter executive session pursuant to Title I, Chapter 13, Section 4056D of the MRSA for the purpose of preparing for contract negotiations.
Second.
All in favor? That is unanimous. Okay, we're back in regular session. Brings us to item 15. Next meeting of the board is scheduled for Wednesday, February 7th at 6:30 here in the West Bath School Library. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Bob,
I second
second
that.
by Mary. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.